Well, again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for our third week in the Year of Service webinars. Let's go ahead and begin as we have done in previous weeks, beginning with a prayer to get us started. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, in your word, you have given us a vision of that holy city to which the nations of the world bring their glory. Behold and visit, we pray, the cities of the earth. Renew the ties of mutual regard which form our civic life. Send us honest and able leaders. Enable us to eliminate poverty, prejudice, and oppression, that peace may prevail with righteousness, justice with order, and that men and women from different cultures and with differing talents may find with one another the fulfillment of their humanity. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Well, I invite you all to open the chat button over either at the bottom of your screen or on the side of your screen and introduce yourself. Just put in there what your name is and what congregation you come from, if you're so willing. Just going to go briefly through what's going on with the schedule for the Theology of Service. We have gone through Theology of Service Part 1 and 2 with Bishop Susan, and tonight we're going to be talking about service with refugees and immigrants, and that will be led by our Multicultural Ministries Missioner at the Diocese, Miss Rachel Ambasing. And then our last session next week, I can't believe we're almost 3/4 of the way through this series. We'll be talking about caring for creation in our year of service, and Miss Adrienne Elliott, who's a member of the Creation Care Task Force, will be sharing with us. Tonight's schedule is as follows. We're going to start with this housekeeping, welcome, and prayer, and then we will have a ministry highlight. And tonight we have actually 2 ministry highlights. We'll have our teaching time, and then we'll have an opportunity to have some breakout time where you get the chance to talk with others in a smaller group setting about the subject of this evening's discussion. So we will hear, as I said, from 2 different ministries in the diocese. We will be hearing from Welcome Ministries, which is based out of St. Albans and El Cajon. And we will also be hearing from Refugee Net, which is based out of St. Luke's in North Park. And then, as I mentioned, after that, we'll be hearing from Miss Rachel Ambasing on serving refugees and immigrants. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my friend Naomi from Welcome Ministries. Naomi, give me a moment here to make you a co-host, and then I will turn it over to you, friend.
All right. Is everyone able to hear me? Do I have it set up right? You never know. Well, I'm glad to be here tonight, and I have the honor of serving as the program manager for the Welcome Ministries of East County. Welcome Ministries is an umbrella of sorts of the ministries that St. Albans has been involved with for years, and a couple of new ones as well. We focus our activities on those on the margins, so to say, people living on the street or transitioning from life on the street, and newcomers, whether they be refugees, asylum seekers, or other immigrants. El Cajon is an incredibly diverse city, as you may know, with people, many people from the Middle East, many different countries in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and many places south of our southern border. As a bedroom community for San Diego, resettlement agencies often look for housing here for new arrivals. It is marginally more affordable, but still not really affordable. In terms of the kinds of ministries that we do, I am sure that many other churches have similar ministries to ours. But I'd like to share with you just a little bit of how we've changed our approach to service over the last few years, because for us, it has been what I would consider a really important change, and maybe it'll resonate with you as well. If I could put it in a nutshell, so to speak, I would say that we don't just minister to folks on the edges of things, but we minister with them. I used to work for the United Methodist Church at the national level in the refugee and immigration ministry. And I heard over and over again about ministry with, not to. And it was a very big push in that denomination over the past decade or so. But those are not just words. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, share. I'm going to optimize. Forgive me for, okay. All right. This is a picture of folks waiting outside the parish hall during our food pantry, which we have on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. And the food pantry has been around a long time.
Naomi, we actually are not seeing that image.
Oh.
We're just seeing a blank screen right now.
It says that my screen sharing was paused. Do you know what Yeah.
Interesting. I'm not sure why.
Shall I try the process over again, maybe?
Yeah, let's try it one more time, just so we can see what
Okay.
you're sharing with us. Just, you can hit stop share and then try one more time.
All right. Erase, go backwards. Okay, here we go.
There we go. I think we're just about there. If you double click on that image, maybe. No?
It still says that my screen sharing is paused. Oh, resume share. Yeah. Every time I try to show the picture, it stops sharing.
Well, we can see a little thumbnail of what it is that you're trying to share.
I am screen sharing, it says.
Oh, there we go. You got it.
There we go. All right. So, and I'm sure, and I am very sure because I've heard that there are a number of congregations who also have food pantries. Because we're in El Cajon, our food pantry serves a lot of Chaldeans, because that's a lot of who is here. And when we first arrived, I'm the wife of the priest out here, Father Dave, who you can see right back there. I was going to try to enlarge him, but this won't go up, so. Maybe it will. Okay, here we go. Nope. Let me show you. He's a big guy with a nice priestly paunch and nice bald head. And you'll notice he's wearing his clerical, which Dave isn't one to do that all the time. But when we started coming, he started coming every time that they had the pantry. People responded really well. Most of the folks who come to our pantry are Chaldean Catholics, and a big bald guy with a clerical collar really resonated for them. And we found that it worked really well to start our ministry, our sharing with prayer. And this is Judy Brown, who is the organizer for the food pantry. And under her probably has jeans and a t-shirt on because it's a lot of work. But we very intentionally started with prayer. And we found that the atmosphere at the food pantry was so different. There are some food distributors who won't give you food if you have prayer. We decided that's okay, we're going to do it anyway. And we have had really good response. One of the things, don't ever take it for granted, especially when you're working with people from a different culture or who don't speak English as a first language, even if they seem to speak English well, don't always assume that they have clued in on everything that you thought you told them. Many people did not realize that the food pantry, which is in our parish hall, which is across the courtyard from the church, was part of the church. They thought it was a government food pantry. We found that out after years of people coming, and the volunteers were shocked. They thought that the people who had come understood that. They did not. And so being very intentional about welcoming people was a big deal. Now you'll see there are empty chairs along with people's baskets. And the reason is those folks are in church. There was a very, very warm Tuesday morning in the summer, and Dave was wandering around looking at so many people who had come early to get in line, and it was very hot. So he went into the church and invited people to come into the cool. They loved it. And they were completely surprised that the church was actually connected to the food pantry. They hadn't figured that out. So they were invited to come in and share a cool space. And before long, we started a bilingual mass, which is another one of our cross-cultural ministries. Happens on the mornings that we have food pantry. And although there's not a lot of people here, before the pandemic, there were anywhere from 15 to 40 people who might come to the mass before the food pantry. Most of these people are from Iraq, and almost to a person, they all have family and friends who are in danger or in trouble, and their hearts are broken, and they would come up for prayer. When Dave started asking if anyone would like special prayer, he was surprised, frankly shocked, to realize everybody wanted prayer. Everybody had really big challenges and really big things on their hearts. So that was one of the welcomes that we were able to bring actually into the church, into our very sanctuary, the folks who were waiting for the food pantry. The other thing was, in the past, it had always been just church volunteers working in the pantry, and then guests receiving from their hands. And we made a change and started using some of our guests who were very anxious and helpful. Excuse me, I went too fast there, and wanted to be a part of that. So they felt like they were part of it. And it was working with each other and not just for somebody. Another one of our ministries that has reached out to newcomers has been what we call Table Talk. It's a conversational English class. This picture was taken during the beginning of the pandemic, before, or it might have been right after they had started to release things a little bit, so people could gather again. And our wonderful volunteers, Lee Silk, Denise Dreyer, Mary Curran Downey, they were involved all the way through the pandemic, getting on the phone with people, just being a friend and talking to people. But again, we found that as we got to know one another and became friends, not just volunteers and guests, they wanted to share with us, and they started to share their culture as well as themselves. And it turned out that we ended up with a lot of culturally interesting food, and it was almost like a brunch every time we got together, because they wanted to share. They wanted to be our friends. They wanted to be part of what we were doing, not just have something done for them, but to have friendship. I think that's really a key. And we had students from some of the colleges that came and participated, and it was mostly women, although we had a few men who joined us. I have to tell you this story. This really goes to the idea that it was important for people to feel like they were part of things. Our secretary got sick. She had already printed the bulletin, but it was not assembled. And when the ladies in Table Talk heard that, they wanted to help. So right at the beginning, everybody's confident. Yep, we got this. We're going to make this happen. Then it got a little more confusing and people were going, now, where does this go? How does this happen? And before long, we had this whole group of people completely baffled, and it took hours. Probably one person could have done it in a half hour, but it took hours before we got it all done. But it was one of the sweetest things we went through. Everybody wanted to help. They loved the idea that they could be part of the church ministry, and they wanted to help. So we had church volunteers. This is Mike Park, one of our church volunteers, who picked up food. But we also had our guests helping unload. And that made for a wonderful new kind of fellowship. And that goes on today. We have some of our guests come a couple hours early so they can ride out to the food bank and pick up food. It was just a wonderful opportunity. One other thing that we have done that reaches out to folks is our church in the park. We have, this was when Bishop Catherine was here, and she joined us on Christmas Eve. But immigrants have always joined us. We were in Wells Park at this time. They've closed the park now, so we're not able to meet there. But when we did, nearly every Sunday, we would have immigrants who would drop in. Sometimes just folks who were with their families in the park, sometimes people who were living on the street. And the most important thing that they appreciated was not just the sack lunch that we shared afterwards, although they did appreciate that. The chance to pray together and to receive communion. And we did that every time we met. It was a welcoming into our life, not just being there so we could do something for them. So if there's anything that I could encourage people with, I would say, welcome people into your life, into your ministry, and you don't have to bring people into your church building to welcome them to the Lord's table, and you don't have to speak the same language to pray together. But encourage people to feel at home and help them as they're making their new home here.
Thank you, Naomi. That's beautiful. I have to say it was a bit entertaining when you were talking about the assembling of the bulletin. I'm not sure what that says about the complications of our bulletins.
Oh, I know. It was funny. It was funny. It was so sweet. It was so sweet. Yeah.
If people want to find out more about Welcome Ministry, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, let me just give you my phone number right now, because that's the quickest thing. You can call St. Albans, you can call Father Dave up there, but let me just give you my phone number. And it's a New York.
You want to maybe put that in the chat box?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat box. I'll put it in the chat box.
Okay.
And that way you can get a hold of me and I can connect you with any information that you might want.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Naomi, for sharing about Welcome Ministry, and thank you for all that you all are doing to serve folks that are new neighbors and in the El Cajon area. We actually have one other guest tonight that we want to introduce you to, friends, to share with us about another ministry that works with refugees. And Catherine Baum from RefugeeNet is here with us. And so we're going to ask Catherine if she would be willing to share with us about RefugeeNet and what's going on over at St. Luke's. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Not fully prepared like Naomi. Thank you, Naomi, for bringing all this picture. Sorry, guys. It brought a lot of great memories because RefugeeNet over the years was part of the food distribution at St. Alban. And I see a lot of familiar faces here. I just want to say hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me over tonight and just have a moment to talk about RefugeeNet. the Ministry of Refugee Net detects a lot of community and everyone else. It's not just an easy work to do it by yourself. And I believe Naomi have brought a lot of great picture that shows not only parishioner, there's other staff member and a church member volunteer to support the cost of the food distribution. And it's a very valuable thing to do when, especially with a refugee when they first enter the United States. There's a lot of family who are vulnerable. They face a lot of language barrier. That's the first thing, is not having the language. Second is finding a job that doesn't pay well because of their interlevel, the skills, they're not skills to find a good paid job. Then they have a difficulty of finding a way around the city because everything required driving. If you're working far away, it's about 2 hours in the bus to get to working place. So if you have a car, it's less than 20 minutes. So it depends. A lot of refugee goes through a lot of these challenges, but it takes volunteer effort, community effort, and that's when all this organization come apart to support. And the Refugee Net, I could talk. I was a former refugee myself. When my family entered the United States 20 years ago, I seen how the nonprofit had helped my family, help us to get a job. They help us to apply for temp jobs. They help my mom, and I've seen applying for supplement assistant and helped her with application and all this. So I've seen all this have done in the previous to my family, and that put me in a place like, hey, I'm right now working as a Refugee Net. I had experience. I've been through what I've seen right now families are going through. But 20 years ago, it's different than right now. 20 years ago, the resources of support wasn't that big right now. Right now, at this time, a lot of involvement happened from Americans that are welcoming refugees, and a group of Americans are creating all this skills training and providing even housing. Housing is a big issue in San Diego. I've seen a lot of refugees that enter San Diego, especially in City Heights earlier. 4 years ago, they all moved out of City Heights and went to El Cajon. So El Cajon is seeing big number of East African refugee plus Middle Eastern refugee because of the housing. I'm not sure how's the housing cost right now in El Cajon area, but we've seen a lot of families are either moving from San Diego to El Cajon or moving out of San Diego completely because of housing. So, and that's another challenge that we are working on to see how we could help people to get into affordable housing. And there's another issue too with affordable housing. It's always advertised as affordable housing, but when you go apply for the building, they might not have enough unit for affordable housing. The building might have 15 to 18 unit only for affordable, and it's a waiting list. So you have a family who are not getting that source of income to meet with the cost of the expenses. And if you're trying to put them on the affordable housing or Section 8 waiting period is 12 years, just for them to be qualified to get that voucher assistance. So there's all this challenge. Housing is a major thing, and that's what a lot of new family are facing. And our service, we're trying our best to get them a place that will be more affordable to their cost of living and everything. So I know the work of Refugee Net takes a lot of volunteer to help us, and I appreciate everyone that really step in and help what we're doing. And if you guys don't know much about Refugee Net, what our focus work is, we help a lot with kids and family that enter the United States first time. They came through resettlement agencies that brought them to the United States. They're here for the resettlement agency service is 90 days, and then the community will take over. After 90 days, they have to look for someone that speaks their language and help them with other resources of supplement they're qualified for. And that's when a Refugee Net have opportunity to take over. So we do casework. Casework involves helping family look for doctor, help family to register their kids to school, help family to find a job that closer distant, and we do help them actually if they're going to continue education in school, how can we apply for them to get into continue education in school for adult family? If there's a younger parents that needed childcare, we as the refugee net casework make sure you apply for all this type of childcare if they're qualified, if there's a waiting list too. So we make sure all this benefit that they're eligible, they are able to access to it. And because of language, they can't do it with no other person that able to navigate and understand the language of reading and computer. So this is a lot of work that casework do in the refugee net. And plus what else we do, we provide food distribution every Thursday, 4 times a month. The reason is some family, they end up having short CalFresh, they give them some food card. So sometimes they end up running out of the food before the month end. So they rely on this pantry. And that's where the part of the refugee net is to make sure they don't have any issue of not getting any food for their kids. So what else the refugee net does, we have created this entrepreneur 2 years ago, is Mama Africa, is to help other moms that are able to cook. And language is an issue for them to find a good paid job. So when they're a part of Mama Africa, they share their cuisine, they share their skills and knowledge of cooking and welcoming new families here in the United States, so make them part of this community. So that was the part of the entrepreneur business was Refugee Net. And it was successful until recently. We just have seen a reduction happen, but we are looking forward for the increased number to come back to after while. So we're hoping for best. So we're hoping for number to increase. We have seen decline a little bit, but I understand it's because there's a lot of shifting happening right now. So nobody to just praying for better and praying for things to come up to be in a better place right now. Our coming fundraising is on March 18th. I'm not sure if Colin is here. I was supposed to share. Yeah. Did Colin give you, Jason, did Colin send you any information about our fundraising?
I can find that. If you want to share with everybody a description of the gala, I'll drop it into the chat for everybody.
Yes, please do. Thank you. So the description of the gala will be March 18th at Cathedral. We'd love for everyone to participate. Please support us because that helps us to continue to do our work and help us to help the new refugee. And since this new program that's going to happen, Welcome Corps, that means people will help and bring refugees. And since that program is going to be coming soon, with that program, it will help Refugee Net with fundraising, will help us to add more extra staff member and effort to give, because right now we have English, Swahili, Arabic caseworker, but we're looking forward to hire someone else that speak non-English because we have seen Afghanistan families attending our food distribution and we don't have anyone that speak their native language. So when we raise money, that's the reason why, is to increase the staffing and increase the work that we do in the community. Anyone have? Thank you, Jason, for sharing the link. Please look at the link and register for our coming event.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you to both you and to Naomi for sharing. It's important for all of us to realize that there are these ministries that are doing such amazing things across the diocese. And sometimes I think we forget, or maybe we didn't even know in the first place, of all the cool things that are going on in various parts of the diocese. And to think that people are worshiping in so many different languages across this diocese is such a cool thing to think on any given week. So all these different languages are worshiping the same God in different dialects and languages, and people from all over the globe are finding a new home in this region, and the Episcopal Church is part of making sure that they find a new home here. So, well, I want to introduce you to the newest member to the diocesan staff, our Multicultural Missioner, Rachel Ambasing. She is new to the team, and we are so glad to have her here, and she is going to be talking with us this evening a little bit further about what it means to be serving alongside and with, as Naomi put it, refugees and immigrants. So welcome, Rachel, and we're so glad that you're here with us this evening. I'm going to turn it over to you, friend.
Thank you. And thank you again to Catherine and Naomi for sharing with us. Those are really, really inspiring stories. And it's always just wonderful to hear firsthand from people who are doing the work in our diocese. So hold on. I'm a millennial that doesn't know how to share her screen. Oh no. I'm so sorry, guys.
Anything I can do to help you out?
Maybe.
At
Okay.
the bottom of your screen, Rachel, there's an icon that says share screen. Press on it.
Thank you, Sandia.
You also can email something to me and I can share it if that'd be easier for you.
That might be at this point. Thank you guys for your patience.
No problem. We've all grown accustomed to technical difficulties over these last 3 years, right, friends?
Okay, Jason, I just sent it over. Oof. Okay, thank you. Yes. So we're going to start off in this first slide. This is an image of an art installation by Rina Saini Kalat, and it's called Woven Chronicle. So this piece is made up of many threads of yarn, and each thread of yarn is connecting to a various part of the international map. And each thread represents one unique story of migration. So this looks like it might be kind of a simple art project, but it actually took Kalat 8 years to make this art piece because of her thoughtfulness and diligence in researching each story as a way of honoring each individual. Too often, when we talk about service with refugees and immigrants, or even in broader conversations regarding refugees or immigrants, the individual and their unique stories can be overlooked or even negated into one simplified or dehumanized kind of general experience, to the point where we might focus on their classifications as refugees or immigrants in a way that greatly redacts and overshadows the true fullness of their being and the true dignity of their identity as beloved and complicated human beings. So one of the reasons I wanted to start off with this slide is because this is a form of communication that somehow tells a collective story, since it is just one distinct art piece, and it also honors the sacredness of the individual. So I myself am coming to you today as a product of two individual threads, or two individual people, each with their own story of immigration, as I am a Filipino and Chinese second-generation American. So on this next slide, you'll see a picture of, this is a picture of me as a baby with my older brother and our parents, James and Crescentia Ambasing. So I'm sharing this with you, one, because I read on the internet that it's nice to like break the ice sometimes in a webinar by showing a personal picture, and also just to share like a little bit of the context that I am coming to you from today. So both of my parents immigrated here in the 70s, and both of them were went to college in the United States. My mother graduated from Southern Illinois University. My father graduated from San Diego State University. And he also served in the military. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with some of the South Bay churches, but this is actually a picture of us standing in front of Good Shepherd in Bonita, which is where I was baptized. And that's what this picture is from. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story. And just knowing that this context with which I am sharing from you as a 38-year-old woman with 38 years of embodied experience as a second-generation American, it might be different from the context that people, and different from the things that people might share with you if they are coming from a context of, say, someone who works in a legal aspect with refugees or immigrants, or someone who has dedicated their life to learning from a more academic standpoint about the struggles of migrants and refugees and immigrants. So on the next, okay, so now let's define some of these terms that we're using, right? Because sometimes we can use the terms refugee or immigrant interchangeably as if they mean the same thing. However, they are different terms. So when we use the term refugee, the definition that's used by Cal Matters and also by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. So the US government further defines a refugee as someone who may face persecution based on religion, political opinion, race, nationality, or membership in a particular social group. And those who obtain refugee status are given protections under international laws and conventions and life-saving support from aid agencies. And this is just another piece of artwork from a Filipino-American artist depicting, I believe they're Sudanese refugees that she met at a refugee camp. On the next slide, when we use the term immigrant, an immigrant is an individual who willingly leaves their country of origin and legally enters another country where they are granted permission to permanently resettle. So their reasons for wanting to settle can be many, from a longing for economic prosperity or for a better education, to the fulfillment of a dream or reunion with family. And even within the immigrant story, there can be a very diverse set of circumstances. In the circumstance of my parents, they were able to achieve stability pretty well, whereas that might not be the case with all immigrants who may not have like the same skill set, or just who work really, really hard, but just somehow things just have not lined up for them in the same kind of economic manner. Some terms that we'll see on the next slide that we can often hear in conversations regarding refugees or immigrants are the term asylum seeker, which is a person who has left their country and is seeking protection from persecution and serious human rights violations in another country, but who hasn't yet been legally recognized as a refugee and is waiting to receive a decision on their asylum claim. And we hear the term migrant, which is, there isn't a legal definition for it, and it's just kind of a broad term referring to an individual who moves from one place to another. Some people say that, some people hear the term migrant a lot in terms of migrant workers. Yes, and some of these terms can also be used interchangeably with each other as well. Yeah, so on the next slide, I did make a mention of differences and commonalities. We mentioned this with the art installation, that each story is different. Each person has their own unique context within these things. But one common thread that individuals in each of these groups may share is that they face circumstances where leaving the place of their birth was the better option than remaining at home. Yes, and just a reminder that while these terms can be helpful in identifying or narrowing down some of the needs and challenges of those coming into this country, It is important to remember that these terms are not the entirety of a person's identity. So, just something to think about how these terms might be helpful or how these terms might be limiting. So what does the Bible say about serving refugees and immigrants? There are a number of scriptural references that we have available to us. If you have any of your favorites, feel free to drop them in the chat if you don't see it already on the screen. But one is from Leviticus 1934. We see commands to treat foreigners or refugees or immigrants or those who have migrated as citizens and with love. There are also instructions throughout the law that made sure foreigners were included in the Jewish community to have their needs met, such as in the command that farmers were to leave the gleanings of their fields for the poor and the foreigner in Leviticus, and to be included in festivals and celebrations of the community, which is instructed in Deuteronomy 16:14 and also in 26:11. I've also shared a quote I've also shared the verse Romans 12:13, and one of my favorites from Luke chapter 10. And speaking of the Gospel of Luke, there are many stories in the Gospels where we see examples of Jesus serving to the margins and restoring them to wholeness in a way that brings them into the center, in a way that allows them to rejoin in the center. So many times when we talk about serving the folks on the margins, we tend to maybe continue to see them on the margins. But if we are talking about radical hospitality, it's not just about welcoming them and keeping them in that context on the side. It's about welcoming and bringing them in, welcoming and making space where they can, any obstacles in the way of them reaching their full potential of fullness and exploring their many gifts and talents and living a full, abundant life where they can thrive, doing what we can to help that to happen. And I did include one of my favorite verses, which is Micah 6:8. And this is just a more broad term, and it's more of just a posture that we might like to embody in all types of service. And it applies to particularly ministering to refugees and immigrants, which is to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So on the next slide, we're talking about ways to serve. So how can we serve our refugee and immigrant siblings? So the reason this is blank is because there are a multitude of ways to serve. So they can be anything from legal to relational. We heard so many of them listed through the presentations given by Naomi and Catherine. Legal, relational, they could help immigrants or refugees in their part of the journey in which they are trying to enter this country or when they're trying to find residence here, or we could find ministries and ways to serve them that help contribute to the stability of their future lives, or even to the future generations that were to come from their lives here. So these things could include, perhaps if you have legal skills, or you know of people who have experience with legal knowledge in trying to find residence, maybe connecting them with communities that need their help. You could have a heart for policy change. And so many times we think of just policy change on the national scale, but there could be policies that affect more of our local communities in a more direct way. Relational ways to serve could also be sponsoring local community centers that have been made, that have been created by and created for people of a certain immigrant or refugee experience who belong to a certain ethnic background. Because one thing that new Americans may have in common is the fact that we have to juggle multiple identities, multiple countries of belonging, if that makes any sense. So in that way, to have a safe space where we can be all of who we are and not have to choose between, the country of our ancestors or the country of our current residents. Those things are important and those things are sacred. So on the next slide, just thinking about what Bishop Susan has shared with us in the past two Theology of Service webinars. She talks a lot about engaging our neighbors and the importance of getting out into their communities and knowing their needs. And this applies in this scenario too. So many times we can focus on the problem before we know the people, right? We hear of one possible problem, and we think that we might need to know the solution before even knowing whether or not that problem applies to our neighbors. So here I have just suggestions to know yourself. First of all, know the gifts that you have to offer and know the gifts of your community, right? Where are you guys at? Do you have people who speak languages and who can help in language services? Do you, what are your interests, right? And the next is to know your neighbors, to know not only their ethnicity, not only their refugee or immigrant status, but like who they are, what their needs are, what their social economic background is, what do they even need? And Bishop Susan also used the term co-powerment, which is a term that rather than empowerment, the term empowerment alludes to the idea that we are giving the people that we are serving power, as if the power is ours to give, when in reality, everyone has their own power. So the term co-powerment is kind of like what Naomi was talking about serving with people instead of ministering to them, because it's us bringing out the best in each other in a way that is mutual and in a way that is collaborative and in a way that is co-creative. So I think, okay, looking at the time, we're going to break out into discussion groups. So I think the question that I have for you all is, what gifts has God given you that may be helpful to serving refugee and immigrant communities? And how might you feel called to serve? These are a lot of questions. So if you want to just focus on the first one, maybe what gifts has God given you that might be helpful to serving immigrant and refugee communities? And then I just expect the conversation will flow naturally from there.
Fantastic, thank you. So friends, what's going to happen next is in a moment, you will find yourself given a notification about joining a small group for discussion. Once you are in your breakout group, I will be dropping in those questions as a reminder for what you can be discussing with each other. And we'll bring you back in about 10 minutes or so. So make sure that not just one person takes all the time. Make sure you give everybody a chance to share so that we can come back briefly to wish you all a good evening. But thank you so much for sharing with us this evening, Rachel, as well as Naomi and Catherine. Okay, so let's get you all into some groups.